started.
All right, so welcome everybody, and thank you very much for joining us today for our Hot Topics in Housing Insights from HAI Group's Fire Prevention Specialist webinar. Thank you very much for your time today. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started. At the conclusion of the webinar today, all of you will receive a copy of the webinar recording along with the slide deck that we're using for the webinar. Along with that will be various resources that we'll be talking about within the webinar, and also a link for our Fire Prevention Center, which is up and live on our website at housingcenter.com. So the follow-up email will have all the content from the presentation along with the resources. So any questions and comments that you may have during the webinar, please feel free to use the chat function within the webinar feature, and we can address questions as they come up or at the end of the presentation. So thanks everybody again for joining us, and we will get started. So just a brief introduction about HAI Group. HAI Group is a family of companies founded by and dedicated to housing. We protect, preserve, and promote the sustainability of affordable housing. We offer insurance, research, advocacy, and training to meet the needs of housing organizations across the nation, which I'm sure you are all joining from various areas across the country. Our mission statement at HAI Group is we are a member-owned organization relentlessly committed to providing reliable insurance solutions, products, and services to the affordable housing community in a manner which exceeds expectations. And our vision statement here at HAI is to promote the sustainability the sustainability of affordable housing by being the insurer of choice and providing asset protection, risk mitigation, and other products and services. So that's who we are at HAI Group. And now we will get started with a brief introduction. So I'll let Dr. Reggie Freeman get started first, and he can introduce himself.
Hey, thanks a lot, Nick. There's only one thing you left off in that introduction about who we are as HAI, and that's the best place in the world to work. Absolutely love my HAI family, and certainly appreciate everything that you do, Nick, in risk control. So as Nick mentioned, my name is Reggie Freeman. I am honored and privileged to serve as a Chief Risk Officer for HAI Group. We have an extraordinary team within our risk control and consultants group. We have, of course, Mary, Debbie, Beth, Chris, Nick W, JB. Everyone works so hard to ensure that their clients and members have everything that they need to be successful. And we try our best to remain as proactive as possible. And I'm truly honored to be a member of the team and the member of the HAI Group family. So my background is very unique. I've been with HAI Group for 4 months now. Recently retired from the fire service, was in the fire service for 22 years, served as fire chief in Iraq for 4 years, also was fire chief in Hartford, Connecticut before being recruited to be the fire chief in Oakland, California, which has been an extraordinary career, very much enjoyed serving and being of service, but even more excited to be with HAI Group and with all of you now. Harvard Fellow, as Nick mentioned, I am Dr. Freeman. I have a PhD in Emergency and Protective Services, and I'm also an adjunct professor for Anna Maria College in Massachusetts and the University of Florida. And I have to say the second best college or university within the SEC, because being from Louisiana, that has to go to LSU. So glad that you're joining us. We're very hopeful that you're going to get a lot out of this discussion, and please reach out to us in the future if we can be of any assistance. Nick?
Sure. So, Chief, that was a great introduction. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Nick Mayo. I'm a senior risk control consultant for HAI Group. I originally started at HAI Group as a risk control associate, worked for some time for HAI Group, and then transitioned to a full-time career in the fire service. So I currently work for the City of Middletown Fire Department in Connecticut as a career firefighter. I'm a lieutenant. assigned to our truck company. So in my days off from the firehouse, I work for HAI as a consultant and work with members in the territory of Connecticut, Rhode Island, New Jersey, Vermont, and as other things come up, just help out the team. So I definitely get to experience both sides of the coin in the risk management world, being one day responding to emergencies on fire apparatus, and the next day working for HAI Group trying to prevent those emergencies from happening. So I think throughout this presentation, you'll be able to get some good feedback, not only from myself as a line officer perspective in the fire service, but also Chief Freeman from an administrative chief. So if any questions come up, please ask. But without further ado, we'll get into the presentation for today now that you know who we are. So our agenda for today and what we're going to talk about is three main topics. We're going to start it off with NFPA's Fire Prevention Week for 2023, which the topic is Cooking Safety Starts With You. Next, we'll transition into information on how to collaborate and work with your local fire department for safety. The pros and cons of working with your local fire department. Again, getting that administrative chief perspective versus a line officer perspective. That's where Chief Freeman and I come in. How, as a housing authority or housing organization, you can leverage some of the resources that we have, being the National Incident Management System framework within the housing community. And we will finish the conversation with a discussion on emergency preparedness and talk about the difference in emergency operation planning versus business continuity planning. I think the timing for all these discussions is great, with Fire Prevention Week just around the corner. Also, we're in peak season for hurricane preparedness and with winter weather coming up. So these are three great topics that we'll talk about today in the short hour that we have. And again, at the end, we'll solicit for any questions, comments, and feedback that you may have. So now we'll get started. All right, Chief.
All right. So why is fire prevention important? I mean, we can have a discussion about that for an entire week in itself, but one thing I'd like to start off by saying in regards to fire prevention, fires just in general, is that we use the term or the word accident way too loosely. I've always been of the mindset that if it is predictable, then it's preventable. And if it's preventable, we cannot call it an accident. It's an avoidable incident. And so when you look at fires, particularly, and from the beginning to when the fire marshal's office is done conducting their investigation, in a lot of instances, or the majority of instances, that fire could have been prevented if just one simple thing was done. And so for us at HAI Group, we are most importantly concerned about our members and their residents, first and foremost, and how we can prevent avoidable incidents from occurring. And when you look at fires, a fire can double in its size in just 30 seconds. Yes, double in size in 30 seconds. And so you have different things that you have to take into consideration with that. Is there air movement that's feeding the fire? How many combustible materials or fire load is in that particular room or structure? But preventing these avoidable incidents from occurring is going to save lives. And that's why we are having this conversation. And fire education, fire prevention is not just for our children. It is for everyone. We all can have a reminder on how to use a fire extinguisher. And brief overview on that. You take the extinguisher off the wall and you use the pass method. You pull the pin out of the extinguisher, you aim at the base of the fire, not at the top of the fire where you have fumes burning, but at the base where the combustible material is burning. And then you squeeze the lever and you sweep in the side-to-side motion. That's how you use your portable fire extinguishers. And so it's very important that we have refresher classes, not only for our common threats in regards to doing fire exit drills or creating exit drills in the home with our children using the Edith method. That is what that acronym stands for, is exit drills in the home. But we also should be regularly using fire extinguishers just to make sure that we stay sharp. And when the time comes, it's second nature. And then lastly, of course, children are part of our vulnerable society, and also our elderly as well. So we have to be certain that we're ensuring that we have a plan to get them out in the event of a fire or any other incident. If they're going to need assistance, we let the fire department know that in advance, that, hey, Mrs. Jones in apartment 2B, she's immobile. We're going to have to send someone to go get her. Or Mr. Taylor, he uses oxygen, and I can see that the fire is getting closer to his apartment. So, just be cautious of that and we're going to talk about that relationship and collaboration with fire departments later on in this presentation. But it's just very important that we identify the risk, we come up with strategy to mitigate those risks, and then, of course, we practice as much as we can, whether it be the use of fire extinguishers, the placement of smoke alarms and carbon monoxide alarms, or conducting fire drills. Nick?
Yeah, so Chief, just before I move on to the next slide, the first point that you made, where a fire can double in size every 30 seconds, if everybody can visualize, let's say, a small fire in a trash can inside the room that they're in right now. So after 30 seconds, that trash can becomes 2. So that may be the size of a coffee table or a small desk. After 2 minutes, that small desk turns into maybe the size of a twin size bed or a queen size bed. So if your average response time for even a career fire department might be 3 to 4 minutes, which is fairly quick, in industry standard, that fire doubles in size and triples and quadruples very fast. So then once the fire department does arrive on scene, it does take time to get up to the unit, to find out what's going on, to gain access. So that's why, just knowing how fires happen, fire behavior, and just how quickly things can evolve, it just bolsters that the foundation to have a proactive relationship with your fire department, because things can get out of hand very fast, and especially in your housing communities with elderly residents and young children, and these are people that we're trying to protect and provide safe and reliable housing. So fire is definitely a topic of discussion that should be a part of your everyday operations at your housing organizations.
Absolutely. Well said, Nick.
Chief, you want to go over Fire Prevention Week?
Sure. So, I like to call it Fire Prevention Month, October, but I'll also take Fire Prevention Week. So that's coming up right around the corner, October 8th through the 14th. And this year's theme, because every year it's a different theme, is Cooking Safety Starts With You. Pay attention to fire prevention. And the theme is very simple. It's going to allow us to focus on what steps can be taken to reduce the risk of fire when we're cooking at home. So obviously, just from looking at this picture on the current slide, make sure you have no combustible materials around your stove. Make sure that you're cooking properly using the proper cookingware, which you would be very surprised how ingenious some folks can get as it pertains to that regard. But even something as simple as making sure that your handle is not facing out towards you when you're cooking, to where someone can accidentally knock that pot or that skillet off of the stove onto the floor, start a fire, or even worse, badly burn that individual. So that's this year's theme, being that roughly 37% of fires that happen in this country are due to cooking or unintended cooking. So let's all play our part together to ensure that we bring that number down as close as possible to 0 as we can.
So the next couple of slides are going to go over some NFPA statistics, and I'm going to cover those. And then following that will be some statistics from the U.S. Fire Administration that Chief will cover. So just to get us started with some NFPA statistics, This is NFPA Fire Prevention Week. Their literature is available on their website. The links will be available in the resources that we send you after this training. Just looking at the slide here, did you know that cooking fires is the leading cause of home fires and home fire injuries? That's a cold and steadfast statistic. Cooking safety does start with you. Anytime you're in the kitchen using a stove and you're cooking appliances, the safety and well-being of yourself and those around you does start with you and you alone. So, and when we get into the statistics, according to NFPA, cooking is the leading cause of home fires, with nearly half being 49% of all home fires involving cooking equipment. It's also the leading cause of home fire injuries. Unattended cooking is the leading cause of home cooking fires and related deaths. In addition, NFPA data shows that cooking is the only major cause of fire that resulted in more fires and fire deaths in 2014 to 2018 than in 1980 to 1984. Some additional statistics and information: cooking oil and grease fires are obviously major factors that come into play when cooking fires do occur. One interesting statistic that I found out in 2018, on average, 470 home cooking fires were reported per day across the United States. So we're looking at almost 500 fires a day. Even though these fires may be small and contained to a pot or pan on the stove, the frequency is very high. So they may be low risk, but they're high frequency. So therefore, we should be learning from our mistakes and creating proactive plans within our housing organizations. The peak days for cooking fires within the United States are two holidays, which are Thanksgiving and Christmas. Everybody's in the kitchen, around the stove, using their appliances. So those are two of the most frequent days to have cooking fires within the United States. And then if we look at the times that these fires happen, between 5 and 8 p.m. Is the most prevalent time for fires to happen. But then we transition to the next period of time being, from 11 p.m. to 7 o'clock in the morning. Although it's a lower frequency in fires, that's when we see the most fatality rates for unattended cooking, being in the later hours of the night. So all these statistics are steadfast and available, and the NFPA gets these their resources from fire departments all across the country when we use our reporting software. So it's just something that is available and able to be studied, and parts of the reports will be sent out in the follow-up conversations for this webinar as well.
So those were some great NFPA statistics that Nick provided, and I'm truly honored and privileged to serve on the board of directors for NFPA for the last 5.5 years now. And NFPA and the relationship that they have with the U.S. Fire Administration is something special, because obviously both have a mission to ensure that there are avoidable incidents that do not occur, through education to the public and giving first responders the resources that they need. So in 2021, fire departments in the United States responded to roughly 170,000 home cooking fires. Now that's coming from roughly 28,000 fire departments spread out through the entire country. These fires, unfortunately, took the lives of 135 people. They injured over 3,000 and roughly $494 million in property loss. Now, out of those statistics, those numbers, the one that troubles me the most is that 135 people lost their life due to fire. And when you start, again, looking at avoidable incidents and asking yourself, was that incident avoidable? And could one thing have been done to prevent that incident from occurring? It's sad when you ask yourself that question, and the answer in most instances is yes. Something could have been done differently to where someone did not have to lose their life. And the leading factor or cause of these cooking fires was unattended cooking equipment, which I mentioned earlier, which was at 37%. And there's a lot of different scenarios that will come into play why we may have someone who may have a fire due to unintended cooking, and being on plenty of fire grounds to where, we did lose structures and even people due to a fire because of unintended cooking, from talking to witnesses or even the homeowner or the renter themselves. It was a multitude of different things. I worked a double, I was exhausted, but I was starving at the same time. So I put something on the stove, I sat down on the couch, and then I fell asleep. Other scenarios that happen frequently is that, I took my medication. Normally my body responds to it to where I'm fine, but this time it just made me a little bit more sleepy or drowsy than it normally does. And next thing you know, I'm choking on smoke and firefighters are pulling me out of the apartment. And so it varies as to why these fires occur, but nevertheless, through education, through partnership, through engagement, we can certainly minimize these instances from occurring. And one way to do that is to ensure that we set timers. And we're going to talk about that here in just a second with Nick. But whether it's our phone, a smart device, the stove itself, our smart watches if we have it, or even a portable clock that you can use to set a timer, that can help us ensure that we're not leaving food on the stove unattended, or have the stove going with the heating element, and next thing you know, we're losing the structure or we have a fire that's out of control. And so, talking more about our safety messages for 2023, just going back to what I just referenced, make sure you always keep a close eye on what you're cooking. Don't stray too far away from the stove if you have the stove on. Ensure that if you bring food to a simmer or baking, you set a timer, as we mentioned earlier, so you can help monitor the food carefully. Clear the cooking area of any combustible materials. And what we mean by combustible materials, that can be any kind of dish rag, that can be mail. I'm the world's worst at putting mail on the counter. Just ask my wife. She tells me not to do it every day, and I still forget and do it anyway. Paper bags from the grocery store, plastic bags, anything that can burn or sustain a flame. Make sure you keep that away from the stove while you're cooking. And we mentioned this earlier as well. Make sure that you turn your pot handles toward the back of the stove, not the front towards you. Whether it's you or a child or a pet, can easily knock that pan or that skillet over and either start a fire or certainly significantly hurt someone or a pet. And speaking of pets, we got to make sure that we create a kid and a pet-free zone at least 3 feet from around the cooking area. Just like if we're utilizing our grills outside, we want it at least 10 feet away from the home. Inside, make sure that it's kid and pet-free at least 3 feet around where you're cooking.
Steve, I can add in one thing. So the second point here, where we're clearing the cooking area of combustible items, and this is recently fresh in my mind, local university that we had here had contractors in all summer rehabbing the student dorms. Part of the student dorms are your typical, 2 or 3 story wood frame townhouses, so they have full kitchens. We got a report for an oven fire at one of the locations. We get up on scene. Smoke was coming out of the house. The students had already evacuated. When we made it inside, we like every stove fire we've been to in the past, the stove was closed and it was just billowing out of the stove. When we opened the stove and put out the combustible materials that were inside the stove, what it turned out to be was it was a brand new stove installed in the summer, and the user's manual for the stove was taped inside the actual oven itself on top, and the students didn't see it. They had literally moved in the day before. It was the first time they were using the stove, and they thought, it's a new stove, turn it on, and we're going to start making a meal. but they didn't realize that the user's instructions were stuck inside. So it's good practice before you turn on your oven. Open it, take a quick peek, look inside. Because everybody, either if they store pots and pans or bread or things like that, you don't want to turn your oven on unless you know what's inside of it. So it was a simple and honest mistake from the students. But then again, it was brand new, it was installed, and the university's maintenance workers showed up, and they didn't even realize that the instructions were taped inside the stove either. So there was little pieces of Swiss cheese all throughout this process where it could have been prevented. But that's just one thing that you would never think of being in a brand new stove was the user instructions. But it happened, and definitely was preventable. So keep that in mind.
It makes you wonder, Nick, why they place the instructions on the top of the stove and not the bottom.
Yeah. You would think they would have just been right on the rack, so when you open the
Yeah.
stove, you can take it right out. So I don't know if somehow in transport they ended up getting caught, but that the user's instructions were what caught fire inside the oven itself. So to back up the safety messages that Chief was just talking about, NFPA has some recommendations that coincide with Fire Prevention Week and the cooking safety message. So this is going to piggyback on what Chief has said so far. So always cook with caution, and that means be on alert. If you're sleepy or taking a medication or possibly consumed alcohol, we want to make sure that we're not using the stove. And these are messages that we're going to relay to our residents. So whether it's in flyers or mail stuffers or posting on the bulletin board or through the resident recertification process when you have a discussion with them, these are what we want to tell them when we're training them for cooking safety best practices. Using a timer is a fantastic resource to have in the kitchen. So whether it's your phone, your smartwatch, your device, or a simple cooking timer that you can get, anywhere in any store, it just helps you stay on alert. Avoiding distractions that remove your focus from what's on the stove. So, what automatically comes to my mind is when we start cooking, maybe something that's going to take a little while. We venture off into the living room, turn on the TV, sit down in our favorite chair, and the next thing you know, it's 7 o'clock and you've got a long day, and you might doze off and go to sleep. So it definitely is important to, when you're using cooking appliances and using anything within the kitchen, to stay in the kitchen. Last and certainly not least, this is an important safety message we want to give to all residents within our properties. When in doubt, just get out. If a fire does happen or there's an emergency within the unit, we want to make sure that we get out of the unit safely, close the door behind us. If the fire alarm has not been activated yet, pull a fire alarm pull station so that everybody can start following the protocols and parameters that they have for the specific location. And we'll talk about, in emergency planning later on in the webinar, how to plan for certain types of things, and fires being one of them is going to be part of that discussion. So these are the recommendations from NFPA that coincide with Fire Prevention Week, which starts next week.
And, one thing I'd like to add to that, Nick, and says, when in doubt, get out, and that reminds me of before you doze, close your door. And that's to your bedroom. A lot of times when there are fatalities due to a structure fire, it is the smoke that unfortunately takes the life of the victim before
Correct.
the fire, if fire at all. But it's always smoke. And so before you go to bed, if you close your door, and if there is a fire anywhere in the house, hopefully you will have your smoke alarms properly placed strategically throughout your home, including one in your hallway outside of your bedroom door, and then also another in your bedroom door. So if there's a fire, you're alarmed. However, if your door is closed, that will give you enough time to try to get out and or call 911 so the firefighters can come get you. If that door is left open, then the smoke will obviously be catastrophic. So just ensure that you close your door to your bedroom before you go to sleep, and ensure in the event when you do leave that you close doors behind you as you're exiting your home in the event there is a fire.
Absolutely. And even to piggyback on that, within your unit inspections or your daily walkthroughs of your properties, if there are doors that are supposed to be self-closing, and for some reason they're not, they're getting hung up or a spring is worn out, self-closing doors are meant to be self-closing. So it definitely should be a part of the inspection protocol as you walk through your properties, because as a measure of fire protection.
Absolutely. And this next slide here, very, very important topic. And I think obviously everything that we're discussing brings value, but this collaborating with your local fire department, this has the potential to really reinvigorate your safety program at your particular location and to provide additional resources that you didn't even know existed prior to today. So we're going to talk about some effective collaboration strategies and initiatives that are out there, and an overview of fire department terminology that you may want to know. So you may ask yourself, so Reggie, why do I want to work with my local fire department? And again, it's about saving lives and preventing avoidable incidents from occurring. Now, most fire departments, if not all, they have a fire prevention bureau or division and/or a community risk reduction division. And so a community risk reduction division, in layman terms, it is public education, fire inspections, code enforcement, all working in synergy to ensure that avoidable incidents don't occur through the reduction of risk. However, the formal, definition of community risk reduction, it's defined by the 5 E's. That's through education, engineering, enforcement, economic incentives, and emergency response. The engineering piece, it sounds complicated, but for the most part, all it simply means is smoke alarms, detectors, and/or sprinklers. That's the engineering aspect of community risk reduction. And so from the fire prevention element, there's going to be segments out of those 5 E's that are incorporated or included in a fire prevention bureau. But the fire department has resources and assets that, through partnership, they're always willing to come out and provide a fire extinguisher class. Some departments might even be able to come out and teach CPR to your tenants, or even to you as an organization. There's also fire prevention. The fire service, it's the old saying that fire prevention month is every month. So it doesn't have to be October for you to engage and call your fire department, your local firehouse, to come to your particular property and engage with you and your tenants. That can happen at any point. So you have a fire department that may have 12 firehouses, and let's just say your particular organization is in Battalion 3 in the Sunnyvale district. And so you'll call the Sunnyvale Firehouse, establish a relationship with that particular firehouse. And so you're on a first name basis with these firefighters. And one thing I found true, and I know Nick will most certainly agree, is that firefighters love what they do. But more importantly, part of that is they're able to serve their community and build relationships to make sure that the community is safe. And they take that responsibility very seriously. So you'd be surprised of the response you would get reaching out to your local firehouse or even the fire marshal's office or a fire inspector's office and say, hey, how can we partner to deliver more programs to our employees at the housing authority and our tenants? They, in most instances, would love nothing more for that to happen. And these 5 E's, if you will, when it all comes together, there's one example I can think of that is truly the epitome of fire departments or a fire department partnering with the community, but specifically a housing authority. So Worcester, Mass, and it took me years to enunciate that because I'm from Louisiana, so I see Worcester. I'm thinking Worcester, but no, it's Worcester. Thank you, Nick, for helping me out with the enunciations. But Worcester, what they did in 2015, they applied for a grant after looking at their data for emergency responses and where they were going more frequently, as well as vulnerable populations within their jurisdiction in Worcester. And there was 4 properties that were senior housing to where 24% of all their reported cooking fires came from these 4 different properties. So the entire city of Worcester, 24% of their cooking fires for emergency responses came from these 4 locations. It averaged 12 incidents a month that the fire department was responding to these addresses. And so the Fire Prevention Bureau, they applied for a grant in a collaborative effort with the Worcester Housing Authority, and they got it. They were able to get a grant to support the collaborative effort that replaced conventional electric coil burners with temperature limiting control technology units to prevent auto ignition. 800 electric stoves were retrofitted with the fire safe burners, and on-site safety education was provided to approximately 900 residents. So in the 6 months after the installation, because the proof is always in the pudding, right? Did it work? 6 months after the installation, there were no stovetop fires where these smart technology burners were installed. No fires 6 months later. So that's the kind of magic that can happen when a housing authority partners with their local fire department.
So to piggyback on what Chief just discussed, and those were some fantastic examples. So examples of effective collaboration with your local fire department include not only regular meetings, but joint training, community events, information sharing, drills and exercises, and that also includes a feedback loop of, looking at the perspective of the fire department when they respond to your site. So I think this is a good area where Chief and I can have a brief discussion where, my perspective as a line officer responding on a truck company is going to be a little bit different in a fire service perspective versus Chief Freeman's perspective, who would be responding as a chief officer for a fire department. So when I look at some of these examples, and I look at the area in which I work in the city of Middletown, Connecticut, I know every federal and state housing authority site that we respond to that we have within our city. Each site has different target hazards, whether it's a high-rise structure, a family site, your 2 or 3 story wood frames, or your single-story joisted masonry construction building. I regularly do walkthroughs with my crew and the guys on my shift, guys and girl firefighters on my shift, in regards to building layout, the types of the property, getting into sprinkler rooms and fire pump rooms. So that way, if we respond to an emergency, we know where we're going, what we're going to do, and have a plan. And most importantly, when we go to our high-rise structures, knowing where the fire pump room is, fire department connection is, sprinkler shut off and isolation valves. Now, granted, I may have a little different perspective, because I know the next day when the claim comes in, it's going to hit my desk and they're going to want to know why the Middletown Fire Department did what they did, from our HAI group, internal employees. But like I said, what I try to do is to foster that communication between, myself, my experience, my crew, and relay the importance of, having a relationship with our housing authority, because whether it's an elderly and young disabled property or a family site, these are people's lives that are going to be affected, and we're going to try to have their lives affected as minimally as possible. God forbid an emergency does happen. Where on the other side of the coin, Chief Freeman can give a little bit of feedback on how regular meetings and community events and that type of engagement, he's already talked about it in the previous slides. Community engagement in the fire service is so important. It starts with a fire prevention week, safety day, or a kid's safety day during the summer months. Having that relationship with your fire department is vitally important, and then they can collaborate with your local police department and other, emergency medical services within your city. If the residents know the people that are responding, they might be more apt to give them, key and pertinent information, during that emergency. So, Chief, I don't know if you had anything else you wanted to add to that, but I just think this is a great time to give a little more backbone to the effective means of collaboration.
Yeah, no, great points, Nick. And I just like to add just a few things. And these regular meetings, it is for the fire department to be able to help you where they can, and even you help them. There's nothing more than firefighters like than to be prepared and to go to clear out any ambiguity in any scenario or any emergency. That's why we train, or that's why firefighters train. And that is why pre-fire plans is so critically important. Nick mentioned that a moment ago. So we have pre-fire plans that are developed for different structures that we know we're going to be responding to or quite possibly respond to. And then pre-incident action plans, or incident action plans as well, which they refer to as IAPs. So between the IAPs, the incident action plans, and the pre-fire plans, the firefighters know exactly where the exits are. They know where, if there's a boiler in the building, they know where that's at. They know where the utility shutoffs are. They know if you do have, because of the regular meetings and information sharing, they know if you have anyone who may be blind or deaf, or may have some sort of mobile issues, so where they may need assistance, or where they know they may have to go get them. All of that comes out with these regular meetings and information sharing. And then transitioning into conducting drills and exercises. There's nothing better than being able to sit down and have a discussion about, hey, we already know what we want to do, but let's together talk about how we want to go about doing it. And so you have these few meetings, you talk about what it is that you want to accomplish with the objectives. Sometimes the objectives may be swayed towards the fire department, while other times it may be for the housing authority. And what I mean by that is just testing systems and testing processes to make sure people truly understand what it is that has to be done if it was a real scenario.
And one meeting that would definitely be effective, and we're going to talk about a little later on in regards to emergency preparedness planning, is even just a discussion with the fire department, and saying, hey, here's our evacuation plan for our building, and this is where people are going to stand, so that way we can collect accountability for our residents. The fire department might come back and say, hey, don't let them collect right there because that's where we're going to park apparatus. So without that feedback from the fire department, you may be, putting people in harm's way without even knowing it, because you just want to get people, out and away from the building. So, creating your emergency plans and evacuation plans in tandem with a fire or emergency services response is a key part to this process.
So, Nick, we do have a question from Cadence, and that is,
Okay.
do you have any recommendations for getting tenants to show up for these events? We can hardly get them to participate in the annual poster contest for Fire Prevention Week for cash prize.
Beyond snacks and providing food, I know other housing authorities have done some type of, whether it's a lunch and learn or training where they provide lunch or snacks and things like that. I understand that it is tough. We do seem to have better collaboration and participation from residents in our elderly high-rise style buildings. The family sites are extremely tough. But when it comes to, let's say you're having some extreme pain points in getting training to the residents. Well, then we need to take advantage of our conversations that we have with them throughout the year. So maybe it's through the rent recertification process or when they do a unit inspection. So if you know you're going to be talking to a tenant, whether it's through recertification or their lease agreement or let's say a maintenance work order, these are times and places that you can have a brief discussion, and we do have resources on our website that are available for key talking points during the recertification process in regards to emergency preparedness. So I understand that question. As we could have all the resources in the world and offer all the services, but if people aren't showing up, then we have to take advantage of the time that they have to talk to us. That's just my perspective. I've been to fire safety trainings on housing authorities with 5 residents in a high rise, and then other trainings have been 50 residents in a high rise. Depends on the time, the date, what snacks are being offered, and who's showing up. So it definitely is a pain point. So I would recommend that if you're having trouble getting information to the residents, then you have to capitalize on the conversations that you're going to have with them, either through rent releases and recertification process.
And the only thing I'll add to that, Cadence, something I've seen that's been very effective, but this is only done on a once a year, an annual basis. If you want a larger event where you want your tenants to come out and participate, get a sponsor. You'd be surprised at the sponsors that would come out of the woodworks that would love to participate and contribute to a cause. So that will cover your food, your beverage, and then also even raffle prizes. And with the caveat, you have to be present to win and have some pretty cool raffle prizes. And it's covered by sponsors. And going back to the fire department and that relationship that you build, whether it's the Fire Prevention Bureau or particularly, more importantly, the firehouse itself, they'll know people that you could reach out to that may be interested in sponsoring. And some of it may even be the equity groups inside of the fire department that would be more than willing to sponsor. So I've seen that be very effective before in the past.
Excellent. So the next 2 slides are going to talk about some fire department terminology and how we can leverage some systems that we have within the fire service and how it could potentially tie to your organizations, especially in the housing world. There's going to be a resource that's distributed that really breaks this down to get a little more simplistic. But the point that I wanted to make within the next couple slides is within the fire service, we have terminology that aims to be uniform throughout the country. So if I'm fighting fire for the city of Middletown, or if Reggie was a chief officer out in Oakland, we're trying to speak the same language. So within that, there's the incident command system. So this is a combination of procedures, personnel, facilities, equipment, and communications operating within an organizational structure. So it's in the fire service, we're a paramilitary organization. So everything is very structured. The person in charge is the incident commander, and then they have their support staff underneath them. And then throughout the incident command module or model, different sections are responsible for different pieces of the puzzle to solve, the problem that we're being called to. So if we look at the slide here for the National Incident Management System, to go over it in brief, we're looking at the incident commander has the overall responsibility for the incident. They're the one that set the objectives. Okay, how can I tie that to a housing organization? So a fire chief may show up on scene. They're the one in command. They're the one in charge. An executive director for a housing authority, they're the highest ranking officer for the housing authority. So they're the one that can and should talk to the incident commander on scene. As an incident commander on scene in the fire service, they start breaking down responsibilities. It goes from operations to planning to logistics and finance. So the operations sections is tactical and organizational resources. Planning develops the IAPs. Logistics provides resources and services. And obviously the finance and administrative section monitors incident-related costs. So if we take the fire service model and look at, how we can tie it to housing in the model that we already have, your executive director becomes your incident commander. Your operations section, maybe you want to tie in your director of operations or your maintenance supervisor, so that way they know who to talk to on scene. So if an incident commander, broke down and gave responsibility to an operations section chief to do fire attack or fire suppression or ventilation activities on site, your maintenance director wants to know what happened, so that way when it comes to planning and revamping and rebuilding the unit post-emergency, that's a good person to talk to. When it comes to logistics, these are people within your organization that have the resources and the materials to rebuild and protect your assets, post-emergency. Within the human resources and the finance world, these are the areas within your housing organization that are going to deal with your costs, along with your HR related tasks that may come up during and after an emergency. So we could literally talk for hours and days, and there's different levels of courses in regards to the National Incident Management System. But the resource that's going to be distributed breaks this down into a very simple model and ties parts of the fire service and emergency services world to the roles and responsibilities that are already established within the housing, different housing organizations. So the model's there, it can be used. It helps makes things a little more digestible during and after an emergency. So this all starts with working collaboratively with your fire department. And then now we can take a little bit of their knowledge and their expertise and tie it back into our housing organization for our properties and residents that we serve.
So Nick, is it a coincidence that the acronym for chief has arrived on scene is chaos?
I don't think so.
I'm just saying. All right, let's talk a little bit about emergency preparedness, operations versus business continuity. So with emergency preparedness, whether it is preparing for making sure that you are minimizing or at least not having fires at all on your properties, that's one aspect, but another is to ensure that you are properly prepared in the event of a natural disaster or a human-caused disaster. And these disasters, they range. It could be a hurricane, it could be tornadoes, winter storms, earthquakes, and fires. If I were to ask the question to anyone on this call right now, if you were living in a hurricane-prone area, are you and your employees ready in the event that you had a hurricane that's going to touch down in the next 48 hours? Do you have your emergency preparedness kit already put together? Do you have instructions from a business continuity perspective as to who is going to be doing what once this hurricane makes landfall? Those are all things that we can do now, or we should do now, before the emergency happens or before we have an incident that occurs. That also can include civil disturbances. We should have a policy as to how we respond and react to a civil disturbance if we are caught in the middle as a housing authority. And when I say caught in the middle, just in the vicinity of a disturbance occurring, or if it's happening on the property itself. What would your team members or employees do if that were to occur right now? And so it's so very important that you put a plan in place, you touch base with your local fire department, your local police department, or even your risk control consultant here at HAI to help walk you through that process. We have the tools and we have the resources to be of assistance. And from an emergency preparedness standpoint, there are 5 different phases. Those phases are prevention, protection, mitigation, response, and recovery. So everything that we're doing right now is in phase one from the prevention realm. And so making sure that you have your kit ready to go, making sure that you tell all your tenants to put all of their critical documentation, their birth certificate, passports into a weatherproof bag or case, and including also their medication. If there's medication that they have to have on a daily basis, make sure that all of that is included in their go bag.
So when we look at preparedness planning and we discuss emergency operations planning versus business continuity planning. Business continuity planning has been a hot topic, probably the past 5 years, potentially more. What a business continuity plan does is it includes the strategies, resources, and procedures for maintaining and restoring critical functions that enable your organization to carry out its mission or achieve business objectives post-disaster or unexpected emergency. So the emergency operations plan is a checklist or an action item list to deal with the flood, the hurricane, the fire, the extreme winter weather conditions. The business continuity plan is going to outline how the housing authority is going to operate as a business post-disaster. One of the best resources that I think we have for our members here at HAI Group is our business continuity planning tool. So on our website, once you log into the Risk Management Center, my business continuity plan was developed with the understanding that every organization has some business continuity policies or activities already in place. So what this business continuity planning tool does is it enables you to create a plan, and it'll give you back a document so that way you can get started in having something written for your housing authority. What we did discuss as a team was having 3 different modules. So we call like a beginner, an intermediate, and an advanced, being an overview, intermediate, or comprehensive business continuity plan. But let's say you have a little bit of time, you want to start the discussion. I just want to do one module and I only have to answer 6 questions to get a sample business continuity plan. That model is already there in just the overview section. So if you log in to the tool, start putting some information and just answer 6 questions, it will give you back the start of a beginner business continuity plan for your housing authority. When you have some more time, you can answer a couple more modules and some additional questions. Now we're building on the foundation that you built within that overview section of the business continuity planning tool. And then when we want to go full bore at it, an additional 8 modules and more questions, this is when we're going to get our full comprehensive business continuity plan. Again, we're just answering questions and inputting information, and the tool is going to create the document for us. And the tool is going to be catered to your specific housing organization. It's going to be given back to you as a Word document so you can edit and review and add or subtract things that work for your housing organization. But what we wanted to create was a turnkey tool for housing authorities to use in creating a business continuity plan. So we do have sample business continuity plans from other housing authorities. We do have sample emergency preparedness plans from other housing authorities. So in the emergency preparedness world, we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. If something's already been created, we want to use it. We want to see if it'll work for us and tweak to our benefit. But the business continuity planning tool that we have available through HAI in our Risk Management Center is a fantastic resource. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to myself, my bosses, Beth or Mary, or any other risk control consultant on our team, because we'll be happily able to guide you through, send you the overview Q&A document to get you started. To round out our discussion, and this is the final talking point that we have, and we understand we're right at our time limit for today, so we appreciate everybody sticking with us throughout this hour. When we talk about emergency preparedness, we want to keep our emergency plans and business continuity plan updated. So this is before, during, and after emergency. So as we go along throughout the year, we're reading our emergency preparedness documents, reviewing contracts that we have and contact information for the people within those contracts. We're communicating with local public safety, so this is working effectively with that collaboration with your fire department. We're using checklists for mechanical equipment, units, and general interior and exterior safety measures. These are all things that we're doing on an annual basis to make sure our plans are updated, up to speed, and aligning with that, we're ensuring that our staff and our residents know the plan. You know, we can have a giant written emergency operations plan, but if it sits on a shelf and collects dust all day and no one knows or no one's been trained on what to do in case of an emergency, you know, this is kind of, you know, improper planning for something that's going to be a significant event. So if we need to simplify our emergency plans from standard operating procedures to checklists, because checklists are a little bit easier to digest during an emergency, you know, that's a great thing to discuss within your safety committee or your meeting with your local fire department. So these are all things that, you know, this is a great season to talk about emergency preparedness. It's a great time of year to not only talk about fire prevention, but touch base with other things that are coming down the pipeline, such as winter weather, springtime, and summer events. So we hope that through the discussion today, you were able to take some notes down, or maybe there's some follow-up questions. But Chief, I don't know if there's anything else that you wanted to add, but I feel like the collaboration that we've had throughout the training was able to give some good feedback for the members. So I definitely appreciate your perspective in this conversation.
Yeah, no, thank you as well as a line firefighter. And I've certainly thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. Just a few things I want to hit on. There was a question from Tracy, and we are at time, or 2 minutes over time. But I think it's a very important question. So long story short, Tracy is stating that there is someone sabotaging their fire alarm control panel, and what can they do about it? I would highly recommend that you put it under lock and key. A lot of instances, I'm surprised that the fire alarm control panel doesn't already have a locking mechanism on it to prevent exactly the scenario that you described, Tracy. However, if it does not, don't just put a lock on it. Contact your fire department, the fire inspector and or the fire marshal, have them come out to the site, tell them what's been going on, and then tell them what your solution is as well, and see if they have an issue with it. The worst case scenario is that you may have to purchase a Knox box for that particular fire alarm control panel if you do lock it down by some means. And that Knox box will be placed right next to the panel. So the firefighters, if they have to get into it, or the fire inspector or fire marshal, they'll be able to access the Knox box, get the key to unlock the fire alarm control panel in the event that it goes off. So that would be my recommendation. That's something that you're not the first property that's happened to. That's very common. So I've seen that be effective before in the past.
Yeah, and especially from my perspective on that, because we respond daily to numerous, you know, false alarms and things like that. So we're dealing with, fire alarm panels quite often. And there's really only two keys that I use to get into fire alarm panels. And over time, those locks definitely can get, worn out, and then you can just pull the cover right off the fire alarm panel and reset the alarm, silence it, and do whatever. So working with your local fire marshal's office or fire prevention bureau, if those locks need to be changed or additional security needs to be put in place, so that way these fire control panels become tamper-proof, the fire prevention bureau is going to be the one to say, okay, let us know what you're thinking. This is by code what we can allow and what we can do as the authority having jurisdiction. But if you explain what you're going through, they're going to be the ones to try to remedy the situation, try to work through it to prevent, these unauthorized access to, a fire control panel within a property.
And the last thing, Nick, fire stop canisters. I mean, we need to convey to the members how great they are, how effective they are. What are your thoughts on that?
So it's definitely something that is, they're readily available. fire stop canisters. So what Chief is talking about are they're small canisters that go within a range hood above a stove top. You know, as cooking fires is the leading cause of home fire deaths and injuries, and the frequency. You know, statistics are out there. Something as small as a cooking fire canister can be installed above the range hood. It looks like a small tuna can with a wick on it, and what it does, if flames start on a stove top and get up into that, then the dry chemical powder is expelled, and you know, in hopes and with the majority of time putting out you know, these cooktop fires. So they're definitely a resource that is available. Contact information for suppliers and vendors is on our website. A lot of housing authorities have submitted for cooktop canisters within our loss prevention fund on an annual basis, and you know, projects have been awarded funds for the installation of cooktop canisters. So what, you know, the goal is to prevent cooking fires. If we prevent cooking fires, then you know, we're preventing fires that eventually go from a kitchen fire to activating a sprinkler head on the 10th floor to water damage down to the first floor, and millions of dollars of property damage. So, you know, just this small little fire suppression device can be the first line of defense to prevent cooking fires from happening.
Absolutely. And then we had Pam shared, we had one fail, which caused a lawsuit. So that goes back to ensure that you check where you're getting these from, follow the manufacturer's recommendations for installation. But then, of course, sometimes things aren't what they should be.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you can hopefully go back, find it in enough time to go back to the vendor and get those devices replaced. That happened with Atlanta, the city of Atlanta, and Atlanta Fire Department, where they installed thousands of smoke alarms in individuals' homes in Atlanta. There was a recall because the batch that they installed was faulty. They had to go back out, take out all those smoke alarms that they installed, and replace them with new ones. So unfortunately, sometimes that happens. But again, it's been our honor and privilege to be here with you today. Thank you so much, Nick, for your insight. Always the true professional. And also, we thank you for joining us. Thank you for the comments. And we look forward to being of assistance and helping in any way that we can moving forward. We hope you have a great fire prevention month and a great fire prevention week. So long.